People coming in here, but it is 1 o'clock and I will get started here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Healing Community Study Learning Collaborative. My name is Lisa Romley, and I'm the Educational Program Coordinator for the HEAL study. Today, we are going to learn ways to create a culture of empowerment and improve recovery outcomes with our discussion of NARR certification. Today's speaker has worked very hard supporting individuals in recovery with substance use disorders as the program administrator for Kentucky Recovery Housing Network, which is the state affiliate for the National Alliance for Recovery Residences. Last year, Jonathan and a Kentucky work group was among the 10 state programs selected to participate in the National Learning Collaborative, focusing on advancing housing-related supports for individuals with substance use disorder. Jonathan holds a bachelor's degree in English from the University of Kentucky and a master's degree in public folklore from Western Kentucky University. Prior to his current position, Jonathan has been employed as a constituent service analysis and a legislative analysis, drafting bills for the Senate Veterans, Military Affairs, and Public Protection Committee. He has over 10 years working as a disability adjudicator with the Social Security Department and the Department of Veterans Affairs. In his spare time, he volunteers as a youth coach, basketball, and flag football. So we're so pleased to have Jonathan Philpot with us here today. Before Jonathan gets started, I just want to remind everybody that this session is being recorded. And if you have any questions, please use either the raise hand feature, which is when you click down at the bottom of the screen, click on reactions and the raised hand, or you can put your question in the chat box or send it to me privately. But I will wait until the end of Jonathan's presentation to read the questions. So I will stop sharing here so Jonathan can set up his slides and get started.
All right, thanks, Lisa. Let me see if I can get my screen shared and we'll get into it. All right, there we go. You guys should see a big white slide that says Kentucky Recovery Housing Network. All right, so as Lisa said, my name is Jonathan Philpot. I'm the program administrator for the Kentucky Recovery Housing Network. I could see a few of you scratching your heads during the intro, like, how did this guy get into all of that? You know, it's just kind of, I fell into it, so to speak. Also, my father is a person in long-term recovery. He has coming up on 25 years sober. So, you know, I know it from that aspect as well. Here you'll see that's our fancy new logo. We had a graphic designer who works for the Department of Behavioral Health, which is where we are housed, create several logos for us, and we host a monthly open call and we let the recovery housing community vote. And this is the logo that they picked. So you guys have the honor of being the first folks to see it. So let me tell you a little about the Kentucky Recovery Housing Network. We are the state affiliate of the National Alliance for Recovery Residences. As I mentioned, I'm a program administrator with the Kentucky Department for Behavioral Health, Developmental, and Intellectual Disabilities. So just to tell you a little about the department, our mission is to provide leadership to prevent disability, build resilience in individuals and their communities, and facilitate recovery for people affected by mental illness, substance abuse, or intellectual or developmental disability. I am part of the Adult Substance Use and Recovery Services Treatment Branch. So I guess the first question I'd like to talk about is why did we do this? You know, what made us think that there was a need for a Kentucky Recovery Housing Network? And, you know, the answer is you hear people talk these days, it's kind of, you know, a buzzword to talk about a food desert. There, to a certain degree, there's a recovery housing desert in Kentucky. So, you know, as we were looking around for places to refer folks to, or some form of criteria for our grant programs to make sure that we were awarding grants to quality recovery residences, there just was not a, that just wasn't in place. So we decided that we needed a network of quality recovery residences that staff could use for referrals and that kind of thing. Also, we were starting to see statewide issues of things like conditional use permits. I'm sure most of you have heard the term NIMBY, but that stands for not in my backyard. And so what you have is various places around the state, some of the major cities, getting involved to, if not curtail, at least exert some sort of level of control about who could open a recovery residence and where, and they were starting to come up with their own their own rules, which is really only a problem in the sense that they're not consistent among communities, and then also they're not necessarily created by folks who are familiar with the recovery community or the social model of recovery. And so you're getting these rules made by more like a neighborhood association who's like, well, I don't want those addicts or alcoholics or whatever. I don't want them living 2 doors down from me, that kind of thing. So we also started to see some legislative attention. There's been so far nothing really major has passed, but there's starting to be a bill here and there. So we wanted to get out ahead of that a little bit and have something in place at the point that the legislature decides that this is a real issue and it needs to be addressed in some way. We want to be in a position to say we've got a good system in place, and here it is. Finally, we just wanted to have a way to build bridges between the recovery housing community and the various state agencies that that these folks interact with, and that can be anything really, like Kentucky Housing Corp or Department of Corrections even. Basically we wanted to not have someone who's trying to open a recovery residence think like, I need to talk to this person in this agency, but I don't know where to start. So that's in part another thing that we wanted to do, was to develop this community and make those connections. So to create the Kentucky Recovery Housing Network, the first thing we did is we just looked around. We were like, is there something else that's already there? And we thought a little bit about just trying to make our own thing, but what we discovered is that the NARR standard existed, and they're already getting some national recognition. So it's something that the federal government, knows about to some extent, and knows is real and of quality. So we chose to pursue becoming a NARR affiliate, and that's really interesting because normally there is a nonprofit agency or a coalition of recovery residences in a state that approaches NARR and becomes the NARR affiliate. We tried really hard to find someone here that could do that and could not. So we are the first state where the state affiliate is housed within state government. So this has sort of been an experiment with us on the part of NARR. As far as implementing our process, we had Danielle Gray from Ohio Recovery Housing, which is the Ohio NARR affiliate, come down and train us. We have also been in a technical assistance process with NARR pretty much from the get-go, both for implementation and development of our advisory council. And, bluntly put, I just called everybody I could call. The recovery housing folks are very friendly and they're very willing to help. So I spoke with recovery housing providers. I spoke with Susan Benz and NARR, that's the Tennessee affiliate. Talked to Danielle quite a bit, talked to the folks in Georgia and Florida. And all of these people were just super happy to reach out and help us get this thing going. So it's been a very grassroots effort. to that, to that point, even we had a meeting of yesterday, but there's a newly developed Appalachian affiliates group. So the Appalachian states are sort of trying to get together in a regional block to talk about issues that affect our states. So having said all that, it begs the question, who or what is NARR? So I'll tell you just very briefly a little bit about them. NARR was founded in 2011 by a group of organizations and individuals with deep recovery housing expertise and the goal of developing and promoting best practices in the operation of recovery residences. So although that sounds fairly recent, the group of organizations actually goes back quite a bit farther than that. NARR's mission is to support persons in recovery from addiction by improving their access to quality recovery residences through standards, support services, placement, education, research, and advocacy. And their vision is that all persons in recovery from addiction have access to the recovery support they need to live happier, healthier lives. NARR values hope, compassion, respect, honesty, responsibility, and fairness. So the primary thing that we do as the Kentucky Recovery Housing Network is operate a voluntary certification program for recovery residences. So I wanted to stress that that is voluntary, primarily because, at the moment, it's overstating it a little bit, but Kentucky is kind of the Wild West in recovery housing. Other than those various local ordinances, there's not a lot of sort of top-down, control or laws or regulations for recovery housing. So, if you want to be certified by the Kentucky Recovery Housing Network, you can be, or you can at least, start the process. However, if you choose not to be, there's not a punishment for that. It's almost like if you're old enough to remember the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. So our intent is not to be a scary or bullying oversight type of agency, which is a big fear that I hear from folks. But rather, we want to help you develop best practices for your recovery residents, and then we also want everyone to know that you operate in a quality way. So let's talk a little bit about certification. What we certify is that a residence meets the best practice requirements of the NARR Standard 3.0. So this is the third version of the NARR Standard that they've developed since 2011. And basically, it's common sense kind of things. There are, they have principles and, well, here, let me just show you. These are the links to the NARR Standard, and we'll send this out later, as I understand, and also to the compendium to the NARR Standard, which explains it a little more in a more friendly manner, let's say. So I don't have the whole NARR Standard in the presentation, but I just wanted to show you what it looks like. There's 4 core principles. When you look at this chart, it's a little bit intimidating, I think. You have to find what NARR level that your residence operates at, and then you look down the columns to see what it is that you need and what you don't need and that kind of thing. It's really not as scary as it looks, but I get a little bit daunting. So that's why we have the NARR Standard 3.0 compendium, which, as you can see here, is a lot more friendly. It explains what these things mean, what they what they look like in actual practice versus just as in a chart on a paper. And basically those are your first 2 places to start. I would almost even say read the compendium first and then go back and read the NARR Standard. I will say about the standard, the NARR Standard is based on the social model of recovery. That is a whole presentation in and of itself, but basically the social model of recovery promotes norms that reinforce healthy living skills and associated values, attitudes, and connection with self and community for sustaining recovery. I think if you want to sum that up in a less formal way, the residents are all people. They need to be treated as people. That's part one. And then part two is people need people. Isolation is not good for anybody, much less folks in recovery. The other way this shows up is in the language of recovery. So, we might say things like return to use instead of relapse, or avoid terms like clean and dirty, because, you're not trying to put a value judgment on someone in that way. So the NARR standard is made up of 4 domains with 10 principles. We looked at that briefly, 31 standards among those 10 principles. And those are basically the individual rules. Those are tailored to each of NARR's 4 levels. You'll note I said 4 levels, but there's only 3 on the PowerPoint. That is because a level 4 residence is basically residential treatment. And so in the state of Kentucky, that's going to be covered under an AODE license. So there's not really a reason for us to certify those folks. Not to say that, I guess, if you really wanted to, that we wouldn't do it, but you're kind of already covered under your license. So, our thought is we're trying to develop the community with less of recovery housing more so than treatment. So that's why we're looking at these 1, 2, and 3 levels of support. So I'll tell you a little bit more about what those will look like as well. First, we'll do domains and principles. So like I said, this is common sense things. So the domains are administrative operations, physical environment, recovery support, and being a good neighbor. So, administrative operations, right? I mean, operate with integrity. So that basically means, don't cheat your residents, don't steal from them. What it looks like in practice is that you give them a receipt for the money they give you. You're upfront with them about anything they might have to pay, upholding their rights. You don't ask them to forfeit their landlord-tenant rights. They don't have to, they're not forced to work for you, for your recovery residents. And then create a culture of empowerment is, basically things like recovery capital, where you are helping your residents become full members of society, where they don't feel like they're other or apart. They're in control of their recovery and their life. And then, of course, develop staff abilities to apply the social model is, make sure your staff knows what that is and is helping these folks, get connected to the recovery community, to their roommates, that kind of thing. Went through a bunch there. So let's see, physical environment. I mean, that's just about the safety of the place. It needs to be clean, well-maintained, but also like a home. It's not sort of a sterile place, if you understand what I mean, where they're not, if you think about all the things that you would want to do in your home, that's what we're looking for there. You should probably have a living room or a shared living space, a kitchen. They need to be able to, I don't know, put up a poster on the wall or things to make where they are their own. So recovery support. This is a good chunk of where those NARR levels come in, is the supports that are in place, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So recovery support, basically your residents should, help these guys get plugged in, as we said, and make that easier for them to do. You could have, depending on the level, let's say maybe not a certified residence, but you could open a residence and just have anybody live there with no process or anything like that. You might not require meetings or drug tests or anything, but to that point, then at what point are you just renting them an apartment versus, helping them with the recovery? So that's what that domain or principle in the recovery support domain looks like. Model pro-social behaviors and relationship enhancement skills. I think that one's fairly obvious. cultivate sense of belonging and responsibility for community. So again, you're just trying to get folks plugged in with the people they live with and who are around them, whether they're in recovery or not. This last one, good neighbor, just be a good neighbor. I always think that one's kind of funny because it's the only thing under it, just be a good neighbor. But what that means is not everybody knows how to be a good neighbor, so in practice, that's, let everybody know how they are supposed to relate to their neighbors, be it where you're supposed to park, if you have any kind of rules about noise. The big one is honestly is if you have, a NIMBY, right? Somebody who doesn't want your folks living there, who come up and kind of get in their face a little bit, that they know how to handle that situation. So, I mean, generally speaking, they should refer that person to someone else and know who that person is and how to contact them. So again, these are not super complicated. They're not anything that you would think, well, I don't understand that. I mean, most of it is our common sense things. So next is the level of support. So a certified residence will be certified as a level 1, 2, or 3 residents. Primarily, we're focused on levels 2 and 3 for the most part because that's the biggest need that we have seen in the state so far. But I would certainly be happy to certify level 1 residents. So, as mentioned before, a level 4 residence is basically residential treatment. Level 3 can look a couple of different ways, but sometimes that's there's a pretty good amount of supervision there. Usually there's like a live-in person in the house. As far as medication goes, that person might be over maintaining the security of all the medication, that kind of thing. There might be some intensive outpatient that happens in a level 3 or in conjunction with the level 3 residents. Level 2 is more casual. There's usually one staff person that they're in there weekly at least. Level 3 would be daily. Same kind of thing. They basically are just keeping everybody accountable and trying to head off any issues before they start. But that's sort of a lot of places have like a phase system. This is not exactly analogous to that, but sort of. So that's a more casual environment. And then level 1 would be something like an Oxford House that's completely democratic, where there's not sort of like a house manager type person beyond, at least maybe there might be somebody who actually deals with the physical facility, but as far as the way the other stuff works is it's just completely democratic. So these next slides, I borrowed them, so they there we are. So as I said, so we have these arrows that move, which kind of exciting, I guess. But so level 1, you have drug screening, house meetings, self-help meetings are encouraged. Level 2, there's quite a bit more structure, peer run groups, drug screening. Usually these will have, you're required to go, 4 or 5 meetings a week, something like that. It is important to note though, that for the NARR standard, that folks are in control of their own recovery. So you can say, you have to go to 4 meetings a week or 3 meetings a week, but you can't say that you have to go to the meeting that happens at the Methodist Church at noon on Wednesdays. Like they have to be your residents have to be able to, drive the boat, so to speak, when it comes to the choices that they make in recovery. So the physical environment for these places, level 1 is usually like a house or maybe a large apartment. Same for level 2. Level 3, we've seen that. It's kind of been interesting. One of the neatest ones I've seen lately, there was a couple of small nursing home facilities that the operator was able to get. So one is a women's residence and one is a men's. But so everyone has their own bedroom and bathroom and things like that, which is sometimes unusual, but it can be a variety of things. And then level 4, again, residential treatment. So that's usually attached to a larger place and can look a number of different ways as well. So staffing, as we said, usually for level 3, there's a facility manager, certified staff, or case managers. Level 2 is maybe has one person sort of like that. I mean, you can have more, but at minimum, we're saying. And then level 1 is fully democratic. So this is the scary part, right? The certification process, like to think about applying and getting through all of this. It's intimidating, I guess. So I will tell you the biggest mistake that people make right off the top is trying to be perfect before you apply. This is not a yes or no application process. You don't fill out your stuff and send it in, then we just say, no, I'm sorry. This is a process where we will work with you. We want you to succeed. So, there are very few things that if you all are flexible at any rate, that we can't find a solution to, barring a couple of deal breakers. I mean, number one, your program does need to be social model. 2, space is the other big thing. So what that usually looks like, if there's a deal breaker for that, is that per the NARR standard, each resident needs to have 50 square feet or more for a bedroom. So what they're basically looking for there is that you don't want to get a 2-bedroom house and then have 14 people in it. I mean, that's not a great way to live. And so, so basically a 10 by 10 room, you can have two residents in there. 10 by 15, you can have 3, that kind of thing. The other one is bathroom facilities. So for every 6 people, you need to have a full bathroom, which per NARR is a shower or tub, a toilet, and a sink. So that's basically the big ones with the space. Beyond that, we can, we're willing to work with you, as far as folks think of us, the state agency boogeyman is going to come in and shut you down. That's not us. That's not what we do. So if you're interested at all, you have questions, or you think you maybe kind of want to do it, but you want us to look at your policies, we are happy to help. We have I have a whole, my one staff person other than myself is a documentation reviewer. And so that's his whole job. I mean, he's very happy to do that for you. So when you do apply, what we would have you do is we have a Google form at the moment. We're working on a more elaborate website for the future, but at the moment we have a Google form. So on that form, you would tell us the basic stuff, your name of your organization, the residents, the contact person, number of bedrooms, bathrooms, maximum number of residents, that kind of thing. Then you would sign and notarize our assurances document, which after we get your form, I'll email it to you. And then sign and return the NARR Code of Ethics. So just to tell you what that assurances document is, it's basically, as I mentioned, there's A, just the 2 of us, but B, I'm not a building inspector, right? So when we come to do a site visit, I'm not going to crawl up in your crawl space or get in the electrical closet and things like that. It's just not something I could do, even if I wanted to do it. So essentially, the assurances document is you telling us that you have done all the things that you need to do to operate legally. So, that means you've had your building inspected, your electrical's up to code, your plumbing's up to code, you're operating as a legal entity, you have a tax ID number or employee identification number, those kinds of things. Because again, we're not building inspectors. So you're certifying to us that you have taken care of those things. As far as the code of ethics, I didn't want to just straight read it to you. So I'll just, the summary of it is that it is the obligation of all recovery residents, owners, and operators and staff to value and respect each resident and to put each individual's recovery and needs at the forefront of all decision making. So you can boil that down to 2 things. That's like the social model we talked about. You need to treat your residents as human beings who have value. And then it's also that the primary purpose of your residence is recovery. I mean, I understand it is to some extent a business, and you have to keep the doors open, but you can't sacrifice the recovery of your residents to do that. So more or less, that's what the totality of the NARR Code of Ethics is about. So next, after the application, that's when we do the documentation review. So that, when I showed you the NARR standard before, this is where that NARR standard is going to show up, is in your policies for various things. So what we have for you is a documentation checklist that you can look at that will tell you the policies that you need and what should be in them or should not be in them in some cases. So again, I didn't want to show the whole thing, but just a little screenshot for you so you can see the checklist, what it looks like. I mean, it's really not that scary. So medication policy, for example, is number 8. That tells you, you need your policy. You need to tell your residents, can they have Tylenol, in the house? If so, where do you put it? That kind of thing. Or if they're on a different kind of medication, MOUD, for example, how is that stored? That sort of thing. Emergency policy is a big one. A lot of times folks just have like a fire, like a fire drill kind of deal. But there are other emergencies. Overdose is one, or just, other kind of physical injury. So basically the policy needs to tell them what to do in these situations. So what we will do when we get that checklist. Oh, I guess let me address too. So you might be thinking, well, we have a handbook. We don't have these separate policies. What do we do in that case? And there's a couple of ways to go about that. Either you can, cut and paste it and send it to us as separate documents, or you can send us that documentation checklist and just put on it where those things are found in your handbook. Like I said, we try to be as flexible as possible because we do want you to succeed. So, so that's, a question that has come up, although it can be a little bit difficult in that if your handbook doesn't, put those items together in the same way, then you kind of end up flipping all through it. So my personal preference is the separate documents, but if you've got it in a handbook, I'll take it. So after we reviewed your documents, we will get back with you, and we review every one, and I'll give you feedback on every one. And that might be, this policy meets the standard. But if it doesn't, I'll let you know, and I'll have suggestions for you as to how to make it meet the standard, or different, maybe some options, even if there are different ways to think about it. So following your documentation review, once we've kind of gone back and forth and got that sorted out, then we schedule an interview. To be honest, I'm not really sure how we're going to do this in the future. We started this program. We signed the contract with NARR April 1st of 2020, and almost immediately we're under a travel ban. So I've done them all. We've done them all over Zoom so far, or if not Zoom, a similar program. So theoretically, we'll be doing them in person in the future, but that's still sort of up in the air. But regardless, what will happen is you will have an interview with a staff person, which will either be me or our reviewer, Jason, who unfortunately could not be here today. And then usually we try to have a volunteer from the recovery housing community present as well to participate, so that you have a peer with you, and that you all have more of a conversation. We don't want everyone's always so scared in these interviews, and it's really not scary or adversarial. I mean, we really want it to be. It's important, but not, in a licensure kind of way, because that's not what we do. So what we're looking for in our interviews is your knowledge of your policies. So, it's easy to have a policy. It's kind of like when, becoming a state employee, right? You spend your whole day in like webinars of all the rules for everything. And then, as you go by, you maybe you don't remember so good, and you have to go back and reference those because you don't know what they all were at the, on your first day, because you didn't have the context. So this kind of thing. Well, another example would be one residence we reviewed had a like down payment essentially to move in, and some upfront money. And I asked them in the interviews, like, well, why do you charge so much money, and they're, up front? And they said, oh, we're not actually doing that. And I was like, well, if you don't do it, then just take it out of your policy. So that's really what we're looking for, is that your policies match up with what actually happens. So a good way to think about it is, if you do it, write it down. If it's written down and you don't do it, then erase it, So basically that's what we're looking for there. I'll also say that we've had a couple of interviews with like the very top guy, like the CEO or whatever, who's the most important guy. And then everybody else that's in the interview, his staff are all scared to death, So it's really better to have, not to say that kind of person can't be there, but just to have the understanding that who we really want to talk to is that person that knows what it's like living in the house day to day, like what a week is like living in that house and that kind of thing. So that's who we're looking to talk to. So for the site visit, and again, that's a little bit up in the air. The way we were doing it was just to have somebody walk through on a cell phone while we were on a Zoom call, which, works okay, but it's not great. So we are looking to be able to come out in person for those. But again, basically this is just looking for that home-like environment again, and just making sure that, you don't have, 4 sets of bunk beds in a 10 by 10 room or something like that. We're not, as I said, we're not inspectors, so we're not going in the attic. We're just looking that the place is in good repair. It's clean. It's a good place to live where recovery can happen. So haven't gone over that. The question then is, why would you put yourself through all of that? So here's the answer. Number one, you get our seal of approval. You are a NARR certified residence, and that means something on the national level. Folks, know what that means. Number two, you're plugged in, with the network as a whole. So it connects you with your peers for advocacy purposes, community development, like our open call. So what you can do there is, if you have a problem, I guarantee you're not the first person to have it. So, this gets you plugged in with other folks who are operating in a similar way as you, and they might have the answer. Collaboration, that looks like a number of things, but in part, the rest of the recovery community knows that you're a good place to refer to. And then the last two, although in Kentucky there are no statutes or anything like that yet, certain grants or grant programs require you to get NARR certified to receive that grant money. And then finally, we are in partnership with the University of Kentucky and KIPRIC, which I believe is the Kentucky Injury Prevention and Recovery Center. We are developing a website called Find Recovery Housing Now Kentucky, or KY. And that, in appearance, looks sort of like an Airbnb kind of thing, but it's a nice website. Folks can use it to find houses, recovery houses in Kentucky with available spots in real time, or they will be able to when it's finished developing. And the only residences that we are going to put on there are certified residences and Oxford houses. So if you want to be part of that, this is the way to go. So I did mention we started about a year ago. So really, we didn't get started until June, pretty much, because there's a little bit of a learning curve for all involved. But where we are now, in the past year, we've certified 20 residences, and we have 197 certified recovery beds between them. And those are in 6 counties spread out all over the state. So we have Lexington, Louisville, Northern Kentucky, sort of Southwest Kentucky and Eastern Kentucky. So we are starting to make a little bit of a splash throughout the state. And finally, I did just want to mention quickly, what about MOUD or MAT, but medication for opioid use disorder. The 3 most common medications that we're talking about there are methadone, buprenorphine or bup, and Vivitrol or naltrexone. So the NARR standard does not require that you accept MOUD. However, it does require that you have a medication policy that says that you do or you don't. And if you do, what you do with it and how you handle it. I will say, a lot of the grants that you're seeing, some of these federal dollars do require that you accept MOUD to access those funds. So my program as the Kentucky Recovery Housing Network does not require you to accept MOUD, but if you're going through a grant program, you almost certainly will be required to as part of the grant, because that's usually what they're for, is expansion of that access. So if you want to get involved, you can join our mailing list, attend our monthly open calls. We have spotlight residences, guest speakers, community discussion. We're having a seminar fairly soon on the social model of recovery. That's being developed through NARR and the Opioid Response Network. So I don't have a solid date on that yet, but I'm thinking September probably. So that's it. So if you have questions, I'd love to hear them.
Thank you, Jonathan. That was wonderful. So much good information there. We do have a ton of questions that came through the chat, but before I get to those questions, I do have in this room is Michaela Chrisman and Whitney Richardson, who have gone through recently the certification process. And I've asked them to just say a few words about that process, the benefit and what challenges they may have. So let me start with Michaela first, and maybe you could say a few words.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the opportunity. And I just, for us, the certification process was very easy. Jonathan, and he's not a big bad wolf that'll come in there and bite you. But we have recovery homes in Cincinnati, Ohio, and in Kenton County, Kentucky. So we had already gone through the process with Ohio Recovery Housing, and so we were a little bit familiar with what was what it kind of looked like. And it was a very laid back type of question and answers, because again, it's due to COVID. And what we did for that is we just walked them around the entire building and the houses. And, if he would be like, oh, back up, we back up. And basically just everything he said, they're just making sure that you have the correct amount of bathrooms and, bed space. And so I value NARR, and to me, it says that we are committed to providing quality recovery housing and not just sober living, because to me, there's a difference. Sober living is basically what you would think of as sober living. Recovery housing is to me focuses on recovery and kind of have more accountability. And so that's the direction that we've decided to go. And I just feel very proud to say that our homes are certified, because you do have to go through this process, and your policies, your procedures, you have to be transparent. And I love that. And I encourage any other, operators to do the same thing, because it gives people, it gives people a place to go that just says, we value you and we value your rights, and our main focus is you versus just collecting money and a head in a bed, so to speak. So I'm really glad that we went through this process, and I'm glad that Kentucky is developing their own certification process.
Thank you, Michaela. I appreciate that. And Whitney?
Thank you so much. And Jonathan, thank you very much for all of that. You covered the information perfectly and went over everything. So I'll be looking forward to everybody's questions too. I actually come from a little bit different background now. I was originally introduced to NARR in 2017. And at that time, I was actually working for a community mental health center that operated recovery residences. And so we worked along with NARR and the state affiliate in Tennessee to align those recovery residences with the best practices based off of NARR. So when I transitioned from the community mental health center to my present role with the opioid response network, that process got kind of turned over to a different person. But I was involved in the early stages of submitting the paperwork and that kind of thing. So part of it is I know a lot of people feel very intimidated by the process and they're scared to some people may even be scared to say, hey, I operate a recovery residence, because a lot of people have had that experience with people of the, not in my backyard, or, we don't want these people in our neighborhoods, that type of thing. When the reality is that recovery residences strengthen communities, and when people in recovery are supported, we are good members of society. So it's a good thing to have recovery residences in your community, but part of that is really having recovery residences that are based off of a model that is based off a best practice standard, which NARR is. And NARR's been around for 10 years now. So that is just, that just goes to show that, it's a model that people want to be a part of. And to be able to say like, hey, our houses are NARR certified, or through Kentucky Recovery Housing Network. Other states are able to utilize that, court systems refer to them, reentry services refer to them. It's getting to, where they're well known in each state. I think there's 28 states right now that are NARR affiliates, and that continues to grow. And so part of that is being able, to recognize that NARR is widely known and continues to grow. And it's not a scary process whatsoever. I promise you, Jonathan and Jason are not scary guys. They're here to help. We're all here to help. So even though the standards, it may look like a checklist kind of process, it's not a checklist. It's not a test. The process is to be supportive and to help. It's more of a conversation, because some folks, they're operating recovery residences, but up until this point, they may not have known that there is a standard to go by. So some people are doing the best that they can. So part of what KRHN is here to do is to help support those folks and can provide technical assistance to folks to help them to get where they need to be to meet the standards. So if you're, considering to applying or have questions, I encourage you to always reach out, because I promise it's not this pass or fail type program. It's really about being supportive and building, a recovery-oriented community in Kentucky, and supporting folks that are in recovery and helping them to transition back out into communities.
Thank you, Whitney, and thank both of you for really speaking about the process isn't that scary, even though it may seem overwhelming. So I really appreciate your positive thoughts. So thank you. And we have Katie Marks here, who is the core project director. And I don't know if you wanted to say a few words, Katie.
Yeah, I'll just briefly first thank Jonathan for his presentation. It's really enjoyable to watch the presentation and also watch the leadership that he has over this project. When CORE started in 2017, we were at an absolute loss for how to fund recovery housing. We needed some standard to ensure that if we were going to use federal funds, that they were going to quality housing. And so this quickly came on our radar, but we did not have the bandwidth right away to do it. We are really grateful to rely on that now. I will say that CORE also requires programs to support folks taking MOUD. And so that is an additional requirement that we have. But having that base standard is really important to us. We work very closely alongside Jonathan and his team, and are also really grateful for the Kentucky Recovery Housing Network and that entity that is growing as an advisory council, as a voice for recovery houses, and as kind of a thought leader for our community.
Thank you, Katie. So we did have a lot of questions come in, Jonathan, during your presentation. So one of the questions here is, as this person asked, as they interview healthcare workers and criminal justice partners and concerned citizens, almost all of them mention that their community lacks housing for transitioning from treatment back to society. And their options are very limited and sometimes even dangerous in pursuit of a drug-free lifestyle. How should the people and anyone that's also gone through this process, this person asked, create these options to make this transition more conducive to recovery, long-term recovery? Is there anything out there that you would recommend?
Well, you know, I'm not sure. I get the exactly what they're getting at, but in terms of what we hope to do with our program is, by virtue of certifying the good houses, that the bad ones essentially go out of business, because people are wondering, you know, why is this? But would you say, is this a question about developing new houses, or?
Right. Creating more better options. Yes.
Gotcha.
I think that's, what this person was trying to get to.
I see. Well, you know, I guess the first thing would be, I would pursue advocacy, you know, as far as your local leaders need to know, that this is you know, because you have to look at, why is there not recovery housing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that NIMBY issue is a problem. Different places have addressed, you know, have tackled that in different ways. Like I'm not sure if it's Lexington maybe, but one community we looked at recently defined any place where 4 unrelated persons lived as a boarding house, and then they subjected it to their boarding house rules, and you had to get a conditional use permit. And so, you know, if you can educate your local folks about the social model of recovery, you know, that you know, to some extent, more is better, and that you need this interaction, like you're and that there is some kind of standard of quality, would be, I think that would be the first step, is to say, here's what we need and why we need it, and it's not necessarily bad. Because, you know, I mean, I don't want to go to the lurid details, but, you know, when I started this position, that's the first thing that happened, is I heard the horror stories of every community. You know, like everybody's like, well, there's this place and they do that and it's awful, you know, and it's like, well, that is bad. Or you know, some places are having I want to say, I saw a news story from Louisville where they were saying, like, they had whole blocks of recovery housing, which I think is exaggeration, but nonetheless, you know, they were trying to say, well, you can't have them too close together. And so, but the reason that they have problems with that is that they weren't actually recovery housing. Like, they just said that they were. So I would say just try to educate as much as possible. There are occasional grants. I don't want to speak too much on that, because just in terms of, maybe Dr. Marks wants to take it, just because out of avoiding conflict of interest. Like, I don't know about the grant application process and things, but there are some grants that could be used in that way to acquire buildings. I correct me if I misspeak, Dr. Marks. You know, so that would be a thing you could do, is pursue some grant funding to try to expand your recovery options, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jonathan. We do try to keep some clear lines so that the Recovery Housing Network never gets conflated with the funding that we allocate, so that people can trust them and us at the same time. But CORE does release funding for recovery housing from time to time. Department for Local Government recently released their first grant, which was really exciting because they funded the purchase of new buildings or building buildings, which is really rare in this space. And then I expect to see more HUD dollars coming through in the near future.
Thank you. Do you see Kentucky requiring the standard down the future? I mean, would this be a possibility that this would be in a requirement, 5 years from now, or?
Well, I would hate to speculate,
Okay.
but I will say that it is a requirement in other states, like Florida, for example, made a rule that their legislature passed a law that you can't refer to, like a treatment center can't refer to recovery housing unless that recovery housing is NARR certified, or FAR certified. It's Florida. We went with Kentucky Recovery Housing Network instead of CAR or KIAR, but most everybody ends in R in some way, but you can't refer in Florida. I want to say in West Virginia, you can't receive state money of any kind unless you're certified. So it seems to be a national trend. I can't predict what our legislators will or will not do. I used to work for the legislature, so I probably could predict, but I shouldn't. So I'll just leave it there.
We
And
really only have.
just to
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
clarify, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, just to clarify,
Yeah.
part of the NARR standard would not require anyone to have a certification, but each state has the ability to operate their affiliate based off the standard. So that would be separate from like a legislation being created that would require it. So just there's kind of that like gray line there as to, funding opportunities or referrals can require that they only refer or give funds to a house that is certified, but that's not something that NARR would require for the affiliates, if that makes sense. Sorry.
It does. Yeah. Thanks, Whitney, for clarifying. We really just have time for one more question. It's a quick question here. What is the cost of certification? And once you are certified, how long is that certification good for?
Gotcha. All right. Well, let me give you the short answer and then a slightly longer answer. Maybe Whitney and Michaela could speak to. But currently, it's free. While we're funded by CORE, it's free to apply and be certified. We are currently certifying for 2 years, at which point you would go through the process again. It's less intensive, of course, because you've already got your policies in place, that kind of thing. But we would just check in with you and do another site visit, that kind of thing. So as far as the cost, right now there is none. So you all can thank Dr. Marks for that. But what other states do, they do that a couple of different ways. I see that as either like a membership model sometimes with a cost per bed for the residents, that kind of thing. Whitney, do you want to say how they do it in Tennessee? Do you know?
Sure. So again, each affiliate kind of has the autonomy to operate based off what their needs are. So it varies state to state. I do know, for example, in Tennessee, they do base it off of the number of beds that you operate. So from like 1 bed to 20 would be a certain set price, so on and so forth. Some affiliates do fees per year. Some do it per 2 years, and then have like monthly check-ins just to kind of make sure that everyone's still, operating based off of the standard. And those fees, because as Jonathan said earlier in the call, Kentucky's a little different just because it's currently housed in the Department of Behavioral Health. Other state affiliates are not that way. And most of them are set up through like grassroots organizations and board members and that type of model. So the fees are basically to kind of, it covers the cost of like travel for people doing site visits, hosting monthly meetings when things are eventually back in person, hopefully, and that type of thing, to keep that operating and going, because most state affiliates don't have, a funding source that is keeping them up and running. So it does vary, state to state. So that's another kind of carrot right now for Kentucky, is that there isn't, a fee for certification. So just another plug to get you interested. But that will change, once the model kind of, changes and transitions to a different, entity or a different not-for-profit agency.
So now's a good time to get in, basically. McKelly, do you know, how does Ohio do it? You're still muted.
Oh, sorry. It definitely charges us. I want to say we paid around $800 or maybe it was $1,000, but we had 8 residences to certify. And then there's the, we just paid for this second year. So it was expensive, but it was totally worth it, because, they're more established in Ohio, the way that I feel Kentucky will be as well. So.
Thank you, Michaela. Well, it is time. It's 2 o'clock. I want to share my screen here just to let you know of our upcoming learning collaboratives that we will be having in the following months. And end of July, we're doing a focus on opioid education and naloxone distribution in the criminal justice system, having an attorney and our pharmacist and also criminal justice professional speaking. And then we've got the buprenorphine dispensing by pharmacists, and then grant writing. So I think the grant writing will be helpful maybe and related to this topic too, for those of us that are looking for opportunities to write grants for recovery housing. And so those are the planned ones. We have the rest of the schedule, but we don't have dates yet for those. But we hope to see you at our future learning collaboratives. I am posting in the chat box the evaluation survey. If you wouldn't mind, it takes less than a minute to do about the session today. That helps us with the feedback, so that as we plan more sessions, that we're meeting your needs. And I wanted to thank Jonathan for a wonderful presentation. It was very informative and I learned a lot, and really appreciate your time here. So thank you, Jonathan, for doing this.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
And for those of you that had questions and didn't get answers, I will get with Jonathan and I'll send them out in an email so that everybody will have those answers. Okay, I'm sorry I couldn't get to that, not enough time.
And I'll put my contact info in the chat. So if
okay,
you
great.
Contact me,
Great.
Feel free.
All right. Well, thank you all for being here, and look forward to you in the next learning collaborative.